This is Zone 5B. My name's Faith, and I'm going to show you how to get some seeds started with the supplies that you have on hand. You don't have to have fancy seed starting supplies and grower trays and cells and all of that. You can work with what you've got. So I'm going to show you some examples of simple containers you can use for seed starting. Egg carton, pretty simple. It's already divided into 12 easy cells. That's not a whole lot of growing space for roots, but for something like a lettuce seedling or a basil seedling, this is going to work just fine. What I do typically is I would tear off the lid so that I would have a little extra support under the tray, and then I would place that, once it's filled with soil and the seeds are in, I would place that in a container that would hold water. And I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. Really simple yogurt containers. The big ones, the small ones, whatever you've got, don't be afraid to use these. You'll need to poke holes in the bottom of any container that you're wanting to start seeds in because they need to drain. So this is a standard grower 6-pack. It's a little deeper than a standard, but this is what I like to use. I have a supply of these and they last a really long time. I've got some that have lasted me over 5 years. So I just rinse them out and reuse them every season. Something like this, just poke holes in the bottom, and you can use this to plant, you could do lettuce seedlings, onion seedlings, same with something like this. This is just your standard meat pack container. It's plastic that you get at the grocery store. You can use this either as a tray for your seed starting container that has the holes in the bottom and you need a way to bottom water your seedlings, or you can use this as a seed starting tray and you just poke holes in the bottom. The reason why we want to poke holes in the bottom is most seedlings are not going to tolerate really saturated, soggy soil, and so it needs to be damp pretty much all the time, but it does need to drain well. This is an example of a seed starting standard 10-20 seed starting flat. You can get, if you're using the 6-packs, you can use 6 of those in the tray. If you're using, or the larger 6-pack, these 6-packs are a little bit smaller, you can get 8 of those. And so you have 48 little seedling cells working in a tray. What I like to do is I double up my trays to make sure that they're going to be able to handle the weight, because I move my trays around a lot, to very light, to harden them off, to take them out into the garden for planting. And so I like to double them up. And in many years I'll have seed flats that have cracks or no longer hold water, and so that's the initial inner layer, and then I put one on the outer layer that can hold water. You just want to make sure that that outer tray, whether it be a standard grower's tray or it's a tray like this, that it holds water, because you're going to put this on a shelf under a light. You can use fluorescent or LED, but you just want to make sure that it's not going to leak out everywhere on you. So I just want to show you an example of how I might use this tray. Well, actually, I'm going to do it with this one, your standard lettuce shell, lettuce clam shell. And so when I'm using this to start seeds, I would start onion seeds in this, I would start celery seeds in this, I would start lettuce seeds in this. Seeds that can be pricked out and transplanted into larger containers once they have got a little bit of growth on them. When you're planting something like this, multi-sown, when you're putting a lot of seeds in one container and they're not individual cells, you want to transplant them out of this scenario into a situation where they can have a little bit more room to grow, develop their own root systems in a single cell. And so that's where you might use smaller yogurt cups or Dixie cups when you're transplanting them on. Something cheap. I've even seen little plastic shot glasses that you can get at, the Dollar Tree, a pack of 48 for just hardly anything at all. And so sensible, reuse what you have, but yeah, be conscious of the environment. Don't just utilize plastic, purchase plastic containers if you don't need to. So if I'm doing lettuce seedlings or onion seedlings, or these are going to be kohlrabi, I like to draw just a little drill. I just, make a little furrow in the seed starting media. You see it's not too deep. These are going to be transplanted out of here really quick. And this is an organic seed starting mix, just a standard seed starting mix. You don't want a potting soil for starting seeds. You want a seed starting mix. It's going to have balanced nutrition and it's going to drain really well. This clamshell already has holes in the bottom. I used it last year. And so what I'm going to do is, I usually have to take my gloves off for this because my hands are not so precise with the gloves on. So I'm going to put about 20 or 30 individual kohlrabi seeds, and these are a brassica. So brassicas can be pricked on or transplanted, potted on when they're really tiny, and they can tolerate root disturbance. So onions can tolerate root disturbance, lettuce can tolerate root disturbance, celery can tolerate root disturbance, brassicas can tolerate root disturbance. There are some plants that really just don't tolerate root disturbance at all very well, and some beans and peas and things like that don't necessarily like to have their roots jarred around too much. So I've planted those 20 or so kohlrabi seeds in the furrow, just going to cover them really lightly. The rule of thumb is to plant a seed under the soil surface just as deep as it is long. So these are little circular seeds. I would say about 1/4 of an inch is just fine for these guys, even 1/8 of an inch, just very lightly covered. This seed starting mix is damp. It's not saturated, it's damp. So now I could sit this in my grower flat and bottom water. Water will wick up through the bottom of this container, and that'll entice roots to grow down, which is what we want. So just an example of what size I might want to prick out a little seedling. Say when these guys are germinated and they're starting to grow, before they put on true leaves, when they still have their little 2 first leaves, these are called cotyledons, that's about the size of what you want to transplant into a larger cell. And so this is a space saver. This is a major space saver for you. So I've got probably about 150 kohlrabi in a 6x11 seed starting flat. But I'm going to need to transplant these guys on into individual cells or individual containers once they get of a certain size. And so you don't want to prick out a seedling that is much larger than this. You can go larger than this, but I like to stick to the smaller size. Let's see, we'll use these guys. This is going to be these, just to let you know, they are celeriac. And so that's in the celery family. They do tolerate this process rather well, and they are an herb that produces a swollen stem that you can use kind of like a root. It's a very good in stock. And so when you're pricking something out, I use, a pencil, a butter knife, this is a chopstick, and what I'm doing is I just grabbed a hold of its little cotyledons. You might be able to see just the tiniest little root there. I don't want to disrupt that root at all. I really don't even want to touch it. I'll just take that little guy, pop him right in the hole that I poked, and he's now got a new home. I don't need to transplant these on because they're already in individual cells. I just wanted to give you an example. They were the perfect size. So you see, I've got him by his leaves and really the soil that's around his little collar there, but I'm not touching his root. And I'm just making a little hole in the seed starting mix with the tool that I'm using, the little dibber tool that I'm using. And I am just pricking him out and not messing with his root, and just placing him in his new home. And now these guys are ready to go in their own little tray, grow on until they've got true leaves and are of maybe 2.5, 3 inches tall before they get planted out in the garden. Really simple. So what are some seedlings that you is you have, those tiny little Dixie cups where you can get more than one seedling started in one individual cell, and you don't have to prick them out, and you can plant them out in the garden just like that. This is a technique that Charles Dowding has really popularized. I do suggest you check him out on YouTube. His channel is just so fascinating. And he's a no-dig gardener, and he's a market gardener, and he's all about saving space. And so he's developed these techniques of multi-sown vegetables that stay in their little group or community and go right into the ground like this. And so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little beet seedlings in this cell, and I would just use my large dibber, poke a hole in the ground the same size as that root plug, and plop that into the ground as it is. And each one of those beets, as they start to grow and swell, there's a chicken back there, those beets will grow and swell, and they'll just push away from each other. And so you'll have 5 or 6 beets. You can harvest the youngest one, or you can get some baby beets out there so that the last 3 or so can get a good size. But it's a great space saver in the garden and in your growing space. Peas, which are one of those plants that don't really like to have their roots interrupted. These guys are a little past their prime for planting out, but they're going to be just fine. I've done this many times. So there are at least 2 seedlings in each one of these cells. They work really nicely planted close together in a multi-cell. Onions work really great that way. Same way the beets do. As these onions grow and start to swell their bulbs, they'll just push away from each other. And so you'll have a little crown of onions that are developing. And you can harvest if you wanted to, if you've got way more than you need in a cell. Like this one has 4, which is fine. If it were 8 or 10 or something like that, I may harvest 2 or 4 or however many of those as spring onions and eat the greens, or as baby onions, and then just let the others develop. And I would just twist them out instead of pulling, because I don't want to disengage the root system of the whole community of onions. Just want to twist it out and break that onion free or break that beet free. Another example, these are rutabagas. So you can do this with your turnips, you can do this with your radishes. Same scenario, multi-sown cells. So spinach does really well like that, arugula, any of those leaf vegetables that you're just going to harvest the outer leaves, which is a great way to harvest. You'll get some great return on that space-wise, and really neat, tidy garden spaces. Watering your trays. So say you have this seedling tray all filled up. You've got your 6 little trays filled up with their seedlings or seeds, even before they germinate. The best way to water is to bottom water. And so I usually would just pick up one of these cells and pour, maybe 1.5 cups or 2 cups of water in each tray as they need it. And I just touch the soil. I pick up the tray. Is it too light? And these are things you'll learn over time. Is it too light? Is it moist to the touch on top? Then, if it's too light and it's dry to the touch, I add water. If it's, nicely heavy and a little dry to the top, it's probably going to be fine, depending on the seedling, depending on the conditions that you have them growing in. Ideally, you want our lights really close to our seedlings so that we have seedlings that grow stocky instead of leggy. So the further the light is away from your seedling, the more leggy your seedling's going to be. That's Jackie. She's our farm cat. So what can be started right now indoors, or what should you have already gotten started in the last week or 2? So tomatoes, chard, okra, those need to be started already. You're not too late, but do get them started right away. Right now, chickpeas, pumpkin, winter squash, Napa cabbage, things like that, we can get those started. Things like lettuce, beets, spinach, arugula, tatsoi, bok choy, we can start all of those in the garden, directly in the garden right now. So don't be afraid to just get out there with your seeds, drill a hole, or pull a furrow and get some seeds in the ground. It's time to build resiliency in our lives. Thanks.